As you well know, Hindu communities across the subcontinent, from north to south, east to west, in every region, they've had the freedom, each community has had the freedom to manage its own internal affairs. That's why there's been a lot of diversity in Hindu personal practices or faith related practices or social practices. So, on the one hand, we had matrilineal communities, on the other hand, we had patrilineal, Maramakutyam, Deyabhaga, Mitaksha, whole range of schools. But most importantly, every community was, even our Shastras say that, Manusmriti says that each community has the freedom to amend, reform, and change its practices as with changing requirements of the times. So, our practices must be time specific, situation specific, and community specific in the sense, what are their predicaments, what are their needs, how do they perceive their needs. So, Hindu personal law and practices have evolved enormously, and the reason that they've been very diverse is because every community, small or big, high or low, had the freedom to decide how much to continue with traditional practices, when to reform them, in what measure to reform them, or whether to discard them. And since we've never had the equivalent of a pope or the fatwa giving authority or any Allah's sanctioned divine book, Hindus don't have any such. No Shankaracharya, no religious authority, dharmic authority in India, not even the greatest Shastrakars, have ever insisted that thou shalt do this, like the biblical commandments or the Quranic injunctions. If you change even comma, full stop, you can be beheaded, you can be eliminated. We've never had that. Each family can decide when and how much to change its practices, reform them, solidify them, whatever. However, the Christian missionaries at that time, in order to facilitate conversion, they had begun to attack Hindu practices on the basis of outright lies. We talk about Islamic al-taqiyya, deceit, lies, and attack. That's what they learned from Christian missionaries. So, Christian missionaries had unleashed a very virulent campaign with the help of British administrators against Hindu practices, making it out as if we were the worst kind of specimens of humanity with regard to women and our social practices. Whereas, in India, among Hindus, we consider the feminine as worship worthy. She is the divine power that moves the universe. And in their mythology, the biblical viewpoint, she's a seductress, she's a temptress, she caused the fall of mankind. So they have a very noxious and humiliating, insulting views of women. And as you well know, they had very oppressive practices with regard to women up to even mid 19th century, mid 20th century. Right to vote had to be fought in in the Western world, um, tooth and nail. Whereas in India, it came very graciously. Right to vote, right to hold office, right to everything. Now, the point is that in order to facilitate conversions, they had to attack Hindu law. Okay. And they did it very, very systematically, building a whole um, mythology of lies and atrocity narrative. Okay. Influenced by that, several reformers, including Macaulay Putra par excellence, Nehru, was very upbeat about reforming Hindu law. So in 1950s, they came up with this Hindu Code Bill. And at that time, there was no great Hindutva party But it's interesting if you follow the parliamentary debates, and I have done a deep study of it. I published a paper on the Hindu Code Bill and its idiocies way back in 1980s. So it's been published in a leading academic journal called the Economic and Political Weekly. I'm in the process of expanding it into a book because this controversy hasn't died down. So at that time, from within Congress, there was tough opposition to Nehru's attempt to reform Hindu Code Bill, primarily on the ground that the leading stalwarts of Congress party said you don't even know what prevails on the ground. You are ignorant about ground reality. You have taken lock, stock, and barrel the negative stereotyping of Hindu society presented to us by Christian missionaries as well as British colonial administrators, because they want to justify their rule in India. So they say, we are here to civilize you. You are uncivilized people. We are here to. That's what they said everywhere, and they destroyed societies. So Congress stalwarts who were very well rooted in their tradition stood firm and criticized Nehru, saying, you don't even know what prevails on the ground. Those debates are very inspiring. Of course, there were some Nehruvians and leftists who were talking nonsense as they talk even today.
Okay.
But the kind of opposition, and very informed, enlightened opposition, where congressmen, stalwarts, showed to Nehru how malinformed he was and how ill-advised his efforts were, and that they were really doing it in a very ham-handed and ugly manner. And one of the things that congressmen of that time and age, very well read, very scholarly, I don't think you will find that kind of scholarly person in today's parliament. The kind of scholarly stalwarts Congress had at that time were very rooted in their cultural traditions. They made two very important points. One, this was never part of the Congress party manifesto. So why are you bringing it? People have not asked for it. You never said that when you come to power, you're going to reform Hindu law. So you're doing it without any mandate from the society at large that has elected you. Very fair criticism. Secondly, they said you're ill-informed. You are talking nonsense. You're talking through your head. You don't even know the diversity that prevails and how creative that diversity is. Thirdly, they pointed out that this was British colonial critique, and you're doing the same thing. The white man's burden story is being repeated. So you're behaving like Macaulay Putras. And fourthly, and this is very important, they said, if you think reform of law is so good and women's rights have to be strengthened as per your modernist notions, why are you leaving Muslims and Christians out? Why are you not including them? So there was a lot of debate and questioning of Nehru on this point, that either it should be for all, it should be a uniform civil code, or leave us alone. But Nehru, as arrogant as he was, as you well know, he never even got elected to be as prime minister. He made Gandhi steal the election for him. There was not a single vote in his favor. Almost all votes had gone in favor of Patel, Sardar Patel, but he stole the election. So similarly, this arrogant Macaulay Putra, because he'd been positioned there by the British, he was their chosen man, he had to carry forward the same agenda that the British colonial imperialists had implemented in India. So, I mean, in a way, people were not wrong in calling him the last white man. You know, the remnants. He was really the inheritor of that whole legacy, and he was as ill-informed about Hindu society as were many of the British who came to rule here. And it's not a coincidence that his famous book is called The Discovery of India. That means he didn't know India.
Okay.
You see, you go and discover a land that is strange, unknown to you. like Columbus discovered America because it was new to him. Whoever discovers their own land, unless you're totally ignorant. So educated, mal-educated in England, and even here, um, very, very European style education. His father had provided him. Even his nannies were European. So he really had no clue about Hindu society. Anyway, he wouldn't even answer these charges. He just road-rollered against the wishes and the will of Hindu society at large, including the then President of India, Rajendra Prasad. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was dead opposed to. Okay. Not only him, I'm saying the tallest stalwarts of the Congress party gave him a tough battle in Parliament. And their arguments were sophisticated. The kind of sophisticated arguments and facts they brought forth, I don't think in today's Parliament such a discussion and debate can even take place. So for me, studying that history through parliamentary debates, Lok Sabha debates, was very, very uplifting to know that at least that generation knew their society. They were rooted in their dharmic tradition and in their culture, unlike the congressmen of this generation or even Bhajpais of this generation. So that time he didn't heed. So the Hindu Code Bill was passed, and you can well imagine how well crafted it must have been, that it's been amended so many times. A law that has such a small shelf life has to be amended repeatedly, um, is obviously not a very good law. Hmm? A good law is fine. And in any case, what it did is it stultified Hindu practices. Earlier, any community could do what they liked. They could internally decide they wanted to reform XYZ practice and go about doing it. There was a lot of flexibility. Now, communities have been rendered absolutely hapless, and which is a very bad thing. A society which hands over power to run its internal affairs, including its family affairs, to a mal-educated sarkar, to bureaucrats and politicians of dubious worth, is a dying society. We were in a live society so long as we took charge of our own affairs. And even Marx had called India a land of self-governing village republics, because every community, every village was free to manage its own internal affairs. So Nehru gave a deadly blow to that at one level through Hindu Code Bill, and the second level, the Samajik panchayats were bypassed in favor of Sarkari panchayats. Okay, so the moment you had party run panchayats, which is BJP versus Congress versus Samajwadi versus, so even every village, every city, every election turns into a battle, like a mini civil war between communities. And within Hindu community also, so many parties are vying for our vote. So they divide us on caste lines, on region lines, on jati, viradri, varna, everything. So they have actually rendered us complete brainless robots who have to blindly obey the laws of the government. And most of those who are enacting laws are ill-informed about the society, as continuing to see society through the Macaulay lenses. And that's why we are a very badly governed society today.